And now it's Deborah Kobylt Live.
Hi, everybody, and thanks for joining us today on Deborah Kobylt Live. And joining me is Lucy Broadbent, journalist, travel writer, and also an author. And here's her latest book, What Would Ted Lasso Do? And for those of you who may not know, Ted Lasso is a charming show on Apple TV Plus. It is a phenomenal show. And basically, the character just sort of is one of the most positive people and influences on all those around him that he's actually had such an effect on Lucy that she decided to write a book about it. How's that, Lucy?
It's true. I did.
It's true. And I just have to say, and ever since watching the show and reading your book, he's now had an effect on me, this character. So thank you for writing this book for the rest of us. So thanks so much for being here for that.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm glad he's had that effect on you. I saw the book as it's spreading the message, continuing the message. It's a message of kindness.
Yeah. And, you know, one of the main words that Ted Lasso lives by is the word believe. Essentially, he is a soccer coach, right, in England. And he's brought there because the owner of the team had a terrible, divorce from her husband and wants the team to fail. So she brought this guy in hoping that everything would go wrong. And no matter what goes wrong, Ted makes it go right? And what's that big sign that he has up in the locker room?
So Ted's big thing is, and this is the thing that's really caught on. He has a sign that says believe, which is in psychologists' terms, is self-efficacy. If we all have the power to, if we believe in ourselves, it's an extraordinarily powerful tool. And there was a professor, Albert Bandura, who studied it a long time ago, and he said that basically, if we think about something, if we believe something is going to happen, it is more likely to happen. If we think we can't do something, it almost guarantees that it won't. So, and Ted takes this idea, he has his belief sign that he pastes in the locker room wall of this soccer team. And it becomes it's become like an icon for the show. But behind it is real psychology, which is just lovely and which we can all use for ourselves. And so that was why I wrote the book, because there are secret messages hidden into the show that's part of the show's DNA, and that they're little lessons, and we can all take them and use them and adopt them for ourselves. That's the beauty of the show, and that was why I wrote the book, because I saw those messages and started to explore the psychology behind them.
Can you tell our audience what are some of those messages? Would you?
Well, so the most remarkable and a standout thing about it is that Ted, he's an American football coach who ends up in London, and he ends up teaching soccer, which he knows nothing about, and that's the basis of this delightful fish out of water comedy. And they could have left it like that. It's just sort of fish out of water, but he is like, the thing that's great about him is that he's like Teflon to really bad things that seem to happen. So what happens is he gets a bad reaction. He's got a whole stadium of fans who call him a wanker, which is a very rude British term. I mean, it's really not what you want to have yelled at you. He's got a wife who wants to divorce him. He's got a boss who's out to destroy him, as you point out. And he is impervious to it. And so how does he do that? Well, there was a psychologist, Viktor Frankl, who wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning. It's a very famous book. He was an Auschwitz survivor. And he was already a psychologist before he was sent to Auschwitz. And he looked at the people around him and how was it that some people survived and did better than others. And it was the people who held on to faith, hope, meaning. Those tended to be the people himself amongst them, who survived, and they survived much better. And so how does that relate to Ted? Ted is chooses his reaction. He could go down the pan, you know, he could be very unhappy, but he chooses his reaction. And that was Viktor Frankl's idea. He argued that we have a choice. Our last remaining freedom is how we choose to react when bad things happen to us. And that's such a lovely message, because bad things are not going to stop happening to Ted. They're not going to stop happening to any one of us. You know, we're all up against it. So how do we choose to react when bad things happen?
That's a tough one, though, right? And his entire team in the locker room, often they're sort of looking at him like he grew a third eyeball, right? Like, are you kidding me? But he just plows through with his message to his entire team, and it begins to get infectious with these guys, right? Can you talk to us about that, about how one person's attitude, genuine, truly positive, kind attitude, how it starts to really infest an entire room very genuinely too. I feel like I know these guys. You know, I start to dream about these characters. I love this show. It's just everything to me. So talk to us about how one person can really have that effect for real.
Well, so Ted's fundamental, the core of who he is a generous. He's a generous personality. He's a kind personality. He is courteous. He's respectful of others. He wants to know people's names. These are lovely things if you can take them on yourself. And perhaps that's a sort of Jason Sudeikis, who co-created and co-wrote and stars in the show, has said that he thinks that one of the most ugly kind of human beings, he's spoken about this before, is someone who is ignorant but also arrogant. And he wanted to create a character that was maybe ignorant, yes, but curious. And it's a nuanced, subtle touch. So you have someone who's a kind of an ingenue, he doesn't know what's going on, but he's curious enough to ask questions. He's curious enough to listen to the answers. He's curious enough to talk to people and bring this generosity of character. And Jason Sudeikis has said, you know, we wanted someone who was not cynical. And it came back, what is the opposite of that? The opposite of cynical? Well, maybe that is kindness. And you're right, to come back to your point, is that kindness can spread like a contagion. If you are nice to other people, you tend to find people are nice to you, they're nice to other people too. And perhaps it's idealistic, but what a marvelous world that would be if we were all kind to each other. It's such a lovely message.
What do we know about Jason in his real life that inspired him to do this? Do you know?
I believe that so the character started out as a commercial for NBC when they were bringing they just bought the rights to show British Premier League soccer over here, and they wanted to introduce it to American audiences. So Jason Sudeikis came up with this Ted Lasso character, and it was a long time ago, like 15 years ago, and that character was this ignorant and arrogant character, and it went down as a commercial. So it was removed from what Ted Lasso is now, and Jason Sudeikis kept thinking, there's something I can do here, and then that is how I understand that's how the show was born. I that's what I've read.
Yeah, but then to develop it so many years later into this marvelous character. Do you know what it's been like for them on the set? What the lead character has been like, and perhaps the way that this message sort of had an effect on you? Do you know if it's had an effect on the entire crew?
Oh, well, yes. Two things to say on that subject. I have been over it was shot in Richmond, London. And as you can hear, that's where I'm from. I'm not from Richmond, but I am from London. And I went over there recently, and there's a girl there who runs Ted Lasso tours. She is marvelous. and she was around when they were filming, and so she lives in the area. And she told me that when they were filming there, everybody in Richmond absolutely adored them. They were, parts of the town had to be shut down for filming. And all the cast and all the crew were just super nice to everybody. They were in the shops. All the shops have got little photos of themselves with the Ted Lasso crew, and with Jason Sudeikis and Brendan Hunt, who also stars. They've all got their little photos in their windows. And they were the crew, I understand, were very, very generous. And I think that so maybe it's lovely to think that spreads amongst a film crew. How it affects other people's lives. That same girl told me that when she takes people on tours, she can see that message is those people. She said, they are the loveliest people that come on my tours. They are courteous, respectful. They all appreciate the tone of the show. They appreciate the character of Ted and what he represents, and try and adopt it for themselves. And I can tell you my own personal story. One of the things that inspired me to write a book about it was that I was sitting in a parking lot, sitting on my phone, and suddenly there's this huge bump, and someone had crashed into the side of my car. And I had been watching Ted Lasso at the time, and I found myself oddly, before I got out of the car and started yelling and cursing, which would be my normal way of doing things, I suddenly thought of Ted, and I thought, well, now how would he react in this situation? And I found myself thinking, well, he'd be decent about it for a start. And so I was, and it was the right thing to do. It turned out to be a little old lady, and she was really sorry. But my big takeaway from that was that I felt good about myself, that I wasn't horrible. I was nice. We sorted it out. There was no need for any cursing or swearing. And I found myself even standing in a supermarket, when I'm a chatty person, maybe you can tell, I chat to people, and I find myself thinking, well, Ted chats to people. He listens to them, and I think that's I found myself adopting some of that myself, and I know that I'm not alone. So that was sort of partly why I ended up writing the book, because if a silly little TV comedy can get under your skin that much and affect your behavior, then there's something really deep to it.
Well, I could almost imagine Ted Lasso in that incident, right? In the car accident, maybe getting out of his car and saying something like, oh, we're going to play the little bumper card today, are we? In other words, he would turn it immediately into a positive or something fun or jovial, and right? Don't you think? And imagine if we could all do this. People, please go see this show, read her book. This really, it's changed me. But can you imagine I'm dreaming about this character? I actually will dream about him. And then I swear, I'll wake up kind of happy. Like this should be shown in schools. It should be shown in prisons. Like, this is the kind of show that everybody needs. Gosh, we should go and do a tour in England. We really should. And you should lead it, Lucy, because you said they do tours, but clearly you're such a fan, you could do one of your own. Let's talk about some of the Ted-isms, if you will. Like, one is be a goldfish, right? Like, can you tell our audience, what does that mean to be a goldfish? And some of the other ones that come up in the show.
Well, yes, they are. The internet has picked up on that and is awash in what they call lassoisms.
Lassoisms.
Yes. He has a whole load of one, and the Be a Good Goldfish is a great one, because it's talking about it comes up in the show right at the very start, actually, and it's a soccer player who's been a fellow soccer player wasn't very nice to him, and Ted tells him, be a goldfish, Sam, and he goes, what? Now, and he said, why? And he said, well, because a goldfish is one of the happiest animals on earth, because it's got a 10-second memory. And so, in other words, when someone insults you, just forget it. Well, now there's Confucius, who's even older than anybody, bequeathed his own version of that, which is, let me see if I can get it right. To be wronged is nothing unless you choose to remember it. So there's depth in a lot of this stuff that he has. I'm trying to think of some of the other ones off the top of my head. The one that always comes to mind is taking on a challenge is a lot like riding a horse. If you're comfortable while you're doing it, then you're probably doing it wrong. And well, so, you know, here I am promoting a book. You know, sometimes, you know, being on camera, not my usual forte. I'm a writer, not someone in front of. And actually, it's utterly enjoyable and it's lovely doing this. But for me, this is something new.
Well, okay, let's talk about that, because just before we went on, right, I believe your side was having some technical issues. Now, I could tell maybe you were getting a little stressed, right? So I said, and this is true, by the way, I've had so many times where I've had mishaps where my internet wasn't working. It went out in the middle of the show, whatever. And I was like, don't worry about it. We'll figure it out, which we did, right? And I had my little lasso moment myself. And I hope it made you feel a little less stressed about it, because at the end of the day, what is it? Okay, the internet went out. It happens, right?
Well, so, I think you're very gracious, because I was in a panic. Internet works perfectly until you decide to go live podcast, and then it goes down. And you were very, very gracious, and I'm very grateful to you, because it was a little bit panicky.
Yeah, but like, I really mean it when I tell you it's happened to me way more than once, and I know how I felt. I was in a panic. So you just pass it forward, right? You just pass it forward. So next time you're on with somebody, you know, now you know a couple little techniques, you'll just pass it to that person and say, well, let's try doing this. So, but yes, because of you, I now know so much more about some of the little tricks, if you will, if you're feeling anxious. Let's go through some of the chapters that you've written. Of course, we talked about believe. That's sort of number one. Be curious, be optimistic, be a do-gooder. What's a do-gooder? Well, okay, so,
I think that refers very specifically in the first season. They suddenly had a Christmas episode. It arrived in August, which was they've said was a gift, because everybody had had such an awful Christmas, which was in the middle of the pandemic. Everyone was hurting. Right. And so they decided to do a Christmas episode that went out in August. And in it, Ted and Rebecca go off and they start giving out gifts to children, knocking on doors. There's other bits in the show where there's a charity gala, which is to raise money for children. So there are little secret nods all the way through the show about how you can do good and help other people. I mean, it's part of the core message, but it actually comes back down to Sudeikis, who himself, I mean, one doesn't want to set someone too much up on a pedestal, but he, the gifts, going around dropping gifts off to children, is a charity that he supported. He was an improv. He started out doing improv, and in Chicago, he did precisely that. He goes back, he's from Kansas, and he's obviously very proud that he's from Kansas. He supports a number of charities in Kansas. One of them he does every year, Thundergong, to raise funds. I think it's for people with amputated limbs. He is very big on volunteering himself. You can find it's documented everywhere. But the reason why it ended up in the book is because when you look at that volunteerism, what does it actually do for us? And what do we learn from it? And there is so much research, really fascinating research, on how it actually has a physical effect for all of us. So they found that older people who volunteer on a regular basis end up living longer. They suffer less ailments. Isn't that extraordinary? That's because they volunteer and they it has a physical component on them. And so there's a lot of research that people who do things are generous in themselves, and they reap the benefits physically and mentally, which is fascinating.
Why do you think we've gotten so far from doing this in our society? It's a complicated question and a complicated answer. But I often think that sort of the nucleus of our family, and I don't necessarily mean our blood relatives, but the sense of community, like you could see that in the little town of Richmond, right? At the local pub, where everyone gets together and they're cheering on their team. And, you know, everyone's part of a community. And I sometimes think we've lost a little of that. We're always sort of in a mood because, you know, you're rushing to work. That's my take on it. What do you think about it? You know, that sometimes prevents us from, you know, the little lasso-isms and just believing in kindness and quiet and gratitude. What do you think?
Oh, I wish I had a great answer for you.
Yeah.
I wish I do.
Yeah.
I think that there are people who spread kindness. This is one example. I'm a great optimist. I am a great optimist, actually, and I think that there are people who work hard to do good. I think it's very easy to get caught up into the news cycle. I think there's a lot of mental health issues that are in the world. And that was one of the things that was great about the show, because they tried to destigmatize the idea that seeking help for mental health issues.
That's right.
And that's important. Maybe we all have to take our own little baby steps, and maybe we all have to do a little bit to spread generosity and kindness, and thereby make a difference. I mean, it's in the small bit. That's all we can as individuals do. And I sort of feel that maybe Ted Lasso would say that too.
You know what I love? His boss she's a tough person, right? She's tough. I mean, on the inside, you could see she's not, but she tries to hold it all together and be really tough. And little by little, he breaks her down, and in a good way, right? He brings her, I guess, biscuits or cookies in the morning. And, you know, just something small begins to build. And then she had some of her own struggles, for example, with her former husband. And he reached out to her. And I just think setting an example the way he did really softened her, which again is just such a great lesson that Ted Lasso is giving to us, right?
Well, I think that you've answered the first question. The question you gave me before, I think that's the answer, isn't it? Is that and he's just so great. He does. We see through the series of the show how over time that philosophy of being kindness makes a difference in other people's lives. Apple is now showing season 3 now. They have always said that it's a 3-season show in terms of the story arcs. Whether there's another series, who knows? And they're not saying. But as you see over 3 seasons, which also coincides to being 3 football seasons or soccer seasons, which is quite fun. But over time you see, so Ted makes a fantastic leader. He's all about leading by example. We sort of explain that. But what we see towards the 3rd season is we see actually Ted's role getting less and less. And what we see is the other characters develop, how that philosophy of being kind to other people, then it softens all of the characters. It's not just Rebecca. And so by the 3rd season, we're seeing Roy, who's this gruff, angry man. And suddenly we see now he's softened, and we see him adopting those great qualities that Ted has. And really many people have said that, you know, you can use his principles of leadership in business management, because how you take care of your employees, as Ted really is doing, makes a difference too in the world. And one of what people who study leadership say is, when you are the leader, what you really want to do is is mentor your employees, so that eventually, as a leader, you almost become redundant. They've adopted your fine examples. They know what to do. And I think that's slowly what we're seeing in Ted Lasso over 3 seasons. We're seeing how the others have become good leaders themselves. And so that's how we see it spread. It's so clever that it spreads across 3 seasons.
Yeah. Even speaking about this, I smile. It really does bring a sense of happiness, joy, almost relief that things are going to be okay. It really is how we look at it, how we frame everything. It's really a beautiful thing. For people who haven't seen it, please drop everything. Get your Apple TV Plus subscription, and it's worth it. Like, this show alone is worth it. I also like in chapter 7, you talk about being a good parent to yourself. Right? A lot of times we're not good parents to ourselves, and then how can we parent other people if we're not, right?
That's absolutely true. That's absolutely true. So they look at the show, they look into the psychology of what shapes us. So I don't want to give away too many things, but there's a thing that we see with dads. So Jamie Tart has a horrible dad. Ted Lasso, it is revealed in season 2. I'm not going to give that away, but he has had an experience with his dad, and that's made him the way that he is. We learn that Rebecca too had an issue with her dad, and slowly we see how those have influenced their characters. And so the idea, it's an idea in therapy now. The show is all about promoting therapy. In season 2, you'll see that they employ a sports therapist who comes in to work with the team. And that has won the show so many plaudits. Real life therapists have said the way they dealt with that was so highly nuanced, so sensitive to the subject, that therapists adored it. And so the idea of reparenting yourself is an idea in therapy, that you basically, maybe you didn't have the best parents, and because not everybody does. And so how do you get past that? Well, you have to kind of try and be a good parent to yourself. In other words, you have to love yourself. And that's an important message. It's why I had to include it as a chapter, because we can all learn from that. Even if we've got great parents, we still need to love ourselves.
Yeah, Lucy, so much in this little book of yours, What Would Ted Lasso Do? What's up next for you? Because you are a journalist, you are a travel writer, you have a very interesting life and career of your own. Would you tell us?
Oh, well, I still do a lot of traveling. That's something that I love. I used to be a travel editor for Hello magazine, and that was such a lovely job. And I've always traveled. It's just something I've always done. So I do write about it for an Australian magazine, and I'm just very privileged, very lucky to go and visit lovely places. So I hope to do that. They've got other books I've written for many years, and I hope to find it a home, a book about type 1 diabetes, and how do you, because I have a son with type 1 diabetes, how do you love someone with diabetes? There's an awful lot of people in the world who have diabetes, and how do you love them properly? So that's an idea. That's maybe a next book. There's talk of another book about Ted Lasso, because there is so much depth to the show that and this book that I have is selling very well. People seem to like it, and I'm just grateful for each and every sale, grateful for each and every review. So maybe another book there. Who knows? I think we're waiting to see whether there's a season 4 of the show.
Yeah, well, you are so delightful. Clearly, a lot of Ted Lasso lives in you, Lucy. So thank you so much for writing this book, for being so kind. And you and I don't live too far from each other, so we really should meet up for some coffee or something. And maybe I'll get some tips from you as well for some travel. We're trying to figure out where to go this year. Ever since COVID, I myself have really struggled on where do I go? Where do I want to go? And I never used to be like that. I would just pick a place on the map and go. So, we'll get together and talk about that too. I'm sure you have plenty of tips. So thank you so much for joining us. Anything you want to say to our audience? Where can they pick up the book? Where can they get in touch with you?
Oh, well, bless you. First of all, thank you very much for having me. And talking to me. And thank you for your enthusiasm for the book. I'm really, really grateful for that. The book is available on Amazon as a paperback and an ebook. People tell me it makes a really nice gift. A lot of mums have been giving it to sons. But just very grateful. And you're very kind too for having me. Thank you.
I enjoyed it. Like I said, I as soon as I got the opportunity to interview you, I couldn't wait. So thank you so much, Lucy. Thank you for writing this beautiful book and for being who you are. Check out the show. Definitely pick up the book. Actually, Mother's Day is here. What a fun gift for Mother's Day. What would Ted Lasso do? How Ted's positive approach can help you. It's helped me. It's clearly had an influence on Lucy and anyone else who comes in its way. So thanks, everybody, for joining our interview. Please pick this up, watch the show, and you can find our program anywhere that you get your podcasts. Video, you can find us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and then, of course, on the audio version, you'll find us on iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Amazon, and anywhere you get your podcasts. Put in our name, Deborah Kobylt Live, and you'll find our interview with Lucy. So thanks, everybody, for joining us. Thanks, Lucy. And we'll see you all next time. Bye.